Today I ran my first online Blood on the Clocktower game using the new app. And the game that I ran didn't go according to plan at all. And I felt rather than uploading footage of the game being played, I would have a look at it and do an analysis. Look at the choices that I made, what was wrong with the setup, and what happened during the game that made things not come together as planned. So let's pop over and let's have a look at the setup. You can see up on the screen here, we've got 7 players. We've got the Imp, we've got the Baron, which is adding 2 outsiders because there's no outsiders by default. We've got the Saint is our main outsider here. We've got the Librarian, and we'll come back to them last because the Librarian is supposed to be the key character in this setup. We've then got the Fortune Teller, we've got the Empath, who is not currently seated next to any evil players, and we have the Slayer. Then the Librarian. The Librarian is the drunk that is put in play from the Baron. The information that the Librarian got is that there is no outsiders in play. And the Librarian is also the red herring. Now, before I run through what happened in this game, let's get to what I was kind of expecting to happen in this game. We've got 3 pairs of players that are each going to be delivering a different worldview on what's happening. We've got the Saint and the Librarian that both say there's a Baron in the game. Or, if the Librarian believes that their information is correct, there's no Baron and the Saint is evil. But either they're together in the information or they're directly apart from their information, and they are telling a specific narrative about outsiders. We've got the Fortune Teller and the Empath, and because they are next to each other, the Empath is likely to trust the Fortune Teller. And then finally we have the Imp and the Baron, and depending on what misinformation they are able to put into the town will determine what kind of worldview is able to be built. If they're able to combat the Baron claim, then the Saint becomes suspicious person number 1. Now, let's get into what actually happened in this game. Immediately when the game starts, the Librarian and the Saint get into a private chat with each other, and the Saint doesn't claim right away. But the Librarian says, "I'm the Librarian. I know there's either no outsiders in this game, or I am the drunk and it is a Baron game." And the Saint goes, "I'm the Saint. This is a Baron game." And they trusted each other immediately and forever from then on. At no point did the Librarian consider that their information was correct and that the Saint was in fact the Imp. This possibly could have been because the game didn't go far enough for their evil team to hide in such a way that people come back to the Saint as the obvious patsy for the evil team. But they trusted each other immediately. That's what happened. The next thing that happened was in that night, before the first day, the Fortune Teller had selected the Empath and the Slayer. And the Empath, being next to the Fortune Teller, also read them. So they woke up, got into a chat next to each other, and they trusted each other instantly. And their plan was to both claim outsiders and push that it was a Baron game. Which obviously when nominations opened, they immediately backflipped on that and they're like, no, actually, we are not outsiders. We just thought it would be a good place to hide and protect our roles. But they also woke up immediately trusting each other, which it doesn't normally happen in Trouble Brewing, in Clocktower in general, but just exactly the way that the information lined up meant that Sidanis here knew Scribe was not the demon specifically, and Scribe, based on their information, knew that Sidanis was not an evil player. When I brought everyone back to the town square for nominations and executions on the first day, all of the chatter was about outsiders. Everyone was discussing the Librarian information and how that could work. The Saint came out, everyone was talking about it is a Baron game. Everyone was very confident it was a Baron game. And no one was executed. No particular person had enough heat on them for them to even score a nomination. So we went straight to sleep. Then we head into the second night, and this is where everything starts to fall apart. We've got the Imp acting first, and the imp targets the slayer. Because when the Slayer and the Imp talks during the first day, the Slayer hinted that they might be a powerful character that does something later on. And unfortunately, the Imp targeting and killing that player makes them now neighbors of the Empath. And so the Empath goes from getting a 0 to getting a 1. On top of this, the Fortune Teller selects both the Imp and the Baron. And so the Fortune Teller and the Empath, who already trust each other very much, wake up with the exact same story that they want to kill the Imp, who is Guri. And also you can see on here, we've got the Librarian, who is the red herring. If the Fortune Teller had selected the Librarian and the Saint instead, they would have gotten a yes, and that could have potentially made them consider that worldview instead. Once everybody wakes up on day 2, a few private chats happen, and the demon goes around claiming to be the chef that saw no pairs of players. And this, unfortunately, doesn't super fit with where all of the trust is in the circle. We've got the Librarian and the Saint sitting next to each other, trust each other very much, have to be on the same team, apparently. Scribe and Sedanis both sitting next to each other and must trust each other very much because of the information that they've gotten, and the Demon and the Baron sitting next to each other. The only way that this would work is that if they could convince the town, a poisoner was in play. But that meant that only Law and Izzy, the Librarian and the Saint, could be the evil team, because they're claiming that a different minion is in play based on their roles. And for that poisoner to work, it would have had to have somehow gotten both Scribe and Sedanis at some point. At least Scribe last night, Guri the first night for his chef information to read the way that it does. And Guri or Helza would have to also be the red herring. Now, when the demon was nominated and executed on this day, that specific narrative didn't come up. He wasn't able to push heat onto any of the other players. He wasn't able to spin a narrative in which he was innocent. And the chef being a role that doesn't do anything later on in the game is very difficult to keep alive when everyone thinks that you're evil. As soon as nominations open, the Imp, claiming to be the chef, says that they were hoping to not have come out as the chef on the first day, trying to goad a specific player that they thought might be the demon into killing them at night, potentially making a better kill for the good team, and not having, as like a bluff to draw heat. This obviously didn't fly very well with the town, and 4 votes came together to slate the demon immediately. The demon then tried to nominate the Baron, who had said nothing all game, pretty much, and tried to get them executed, which obviously didn't carry enough votes because there was way more suspicion on the demon, and then the demon was executed, ending the game. So this is what the Grima looked like at the conclusion of the game. We have the Imp executed on the second day after killing the Slayer at night, and then all the information in the game pointed towards the demon. This is not a very climactic game. It didn't make it to final day. Nothing really went according to plan. So let's break it down. That's why I wanted to make this video. That's why I wanted to go over the game and see why what I thought would work in my head didn't work in practice. Let's start off with the Librarian and the Saint. These two characters are supposed to be in opposition in some way. The Librarian knows for a fact that the Saint's not in play, and the Saint obviously knows that they are a Saint. And so finding out where that misinformation is supposed to be part of the driving force of the game. If the evil team is able to operate in such a way that they're able to also purport misinformation to maybe look like they could also be a drunk target, or if the fortune teller hit the red herring, or it's like specifically hit the red herring on the Librarian at the Saint at the same time is different to specifically hit the red herring and any other player. Because incriminating the Librarian separately from the Saint and incriminating them together, I think, is a different outcome. but there was supposed to be a lot of heat on the librarian because what they are saying directly contradicts the saint, and vice versa. These people are supposed to be in opposition. But, and here's where obviously things didn't quite work, but they trust each other immediately. They went and talked to each other. They go, oh, we both know there's outsiders to play. Must be Baron game. Sick, cool, best friends. Obviously not great. Perhaps if they had talked to different people on the first day, maybe this outcome would have been different. The other thing is that I had potentially a different choice here. I could either make the librarian drunk and tell them there's no outsiders in play, which was like specifically the thing I wanted to do because that is a choice that is not very often shown. We then have the other choice of the librarian seeing drunk amongst other players. So if the librarian comes out and goes, okay, either I'm the drunk, the fortune teller is the drunk, or the empath is the drunk, this would have worked much better with how the game played out. Because when the demon wakes up and the empath and the fortune teller both go, we both know you're evil, they can go, okay, it's drunk empath, I'm red herring. The fortune teller is framing me in particular because I read as evil in most of the games that I played. Actually, which is a good transition into the next thing. The player playing the imp does read as evil in a lot of the games that they play because they have that kind of mischievous persona. And at the end of the game, after the game had ended, the librarian even said that they believe that he was the minion, not the demon. Now, part of this setup, this is kind of the Baron's paradise. Because if the librarian believes no outsiders are in play, the Baron has the opportunity to spin whatever narrative that they want about what minion is in play, what characters or what information or whatever that they've gotten, which gives them a lot of freedom in what kind of a bluff or kind of a crazy stuff they could come up with. But the player playing the Baron was basically silent the entire game. When they got nominated, they were like, don't execute me, thanks. That was kind of it. Now, if these were swapped, if the imp player and the Baron player were each other's roles instead, everything would have gone much better, obviously. The fortune teller hitting the imp and the Baron at the same time would still get a yes, and the empath would still get a yes, but the Baron would be executed and the imp would still be alive. And then potentially, based on who the fortune teller checks, like if the fortune teller doesn't check the empath and they get anyone between librarian, saint, and the imp, they get a yes. And so their information no longer is as clear, and that could have potentially pushed towards putting heat onto the saint, putting heat onto the librarian. A bit harder to do that with the fake chef information that came out. That definitely wouldn't fit so great with trying to set them up as evil. And what would I have done differently knowing that this would play out exactly the way that it did? I had a few opportunities to change things. For some reason, Guri, the player who was playing the imp, has a bug with their online client where they never receive their character when characters are sent out. What I could have done is, recognizing the way that the box is set up, I could have changed his character. Say, you're the Baron. He knows nothing different. I then go to the Baron player and go, I've made a mistake. You are actually the imp. They probably doesn't change anything for them. They don't get any new information about the game. Beyond the fact that there's a Baron in play, which they would find out if they talk to the minion. But it matches up the players' personalities with the roles that they got a bit better, and it would make things a bit better for the evil team. That is a possibility. I don't necessarily recommend it, and there is very few circumstances where you can do this. Sometimes that just comes down to the drunk token is usually the one that gets moved around the most, because you might, in the setup, tentatively think that, oh, this is the best spot, but then you find out maybe there's a better place for it later on. And because when the tokens come out of the bag, that character hasn't interacted with the game in any way. So stuff like that is kind of fine. Some of the other things, I think maybe the Slayer being a different character, or either the fortune teller or the empath being a first night info character might have been better. If the empath was the chef, that would have made things a bit better. That possibly would have been a much better balanced game. Unfortunately, because of exactly where the empath and the fortune teller were sitting and exactly who the fortune teller picked, they trust each other immediately. But if it's chef fortune teller, the fortune teller goes, okay, I kind of trust you, and the chef's like, there's a pair of evil players, and then based on the information that the fortune teller picked on the first night, there's 2 remaining pairs of people for them to potentially check. Each of the pairs has a red herring amongst them. One being the demon, person that reads as demon, and the other one being the red herring, which reads as demon. Which, based on who lives and dies, could be really relevant for the fortune teller information. But unfortunately, because of where the empath was sitting and who was killed, they just found the demon immediately. There might not have been such a reason for the fortune teller to come out on just their first yes if they didn't also have the empath information of I have an evil neighbor. If the Slayer was a different character, because the Slayer didn't actually get to fire off in this game, that maybe also could have been more relevant. If they were an information character, they got misinformation. One of the other things I think I could have done that might have changed things a bit is provide an outsider as one of the bluffs for the demon. Because the demon can go, oh, whatever, I'm this info character, this is what I know, and they go, oh no, actually I was the butler, but I didn't want to get executed like right away, or something like that, where they can fall back on being an outsider, in which they directly clash with the librarian and the saint, and then they split up the table as to who could potentially be in what role. But unfortunately, this is how it panned out. That you can't be right every time. You will make mistakes. I've storytelled many games. It has been a long time since my last one, but I'm still going to make mistakes. This is a setup that I thought would be okay, but like perhaps on the outset there's too many info characters. This is an overcorrection from me, because the last couple of games that I had played, we had 1 info character in games of players between 7 and 9 player count, and each time of those 2 games, the each night info character was either executed on the first day or killed at night, and the town had very little information to try and figure out the game with, which is tough. And so that obviously is me overcompensating a little bit. If the imp had killed the empath or killed the fortune teller or killed not a neighbor, this game is radically different. I think they needed to keep the saint and the drunk librarian alive as their perfect patsy pair. So if the imp had killed the empath or killed the fortune teller, this game would be very different. Unfortunately, everything flips the wrong side of the coin in this one. And only through coming back and looking at it and like what kind of choices I made and how these things worked out, what could I have done differently? On looking at the setup, I could have gone, okay, the empath and the fortune teller are probably going to trust each other because the empath is going to know that they have no evil neighbors. So in that case, I might change the librarian to not being the drunk, to making somebody else be the drunk. I might make the empath the drunk that got a 1, and then the librarian is casting like a drunk shadow on 2 players instead of what I had done here. And that would be me operating in the interest of creating a more balanced game, instead of me specifically trying to do a setup where the librarian gets a 0 at load in as incorrect information. But that's me reflecting on this game. That's not necessarily correct either. That's just what I think maybe I would do differently. That's my assessment of how the game went. It's not like we had super angry players coming out of the game. It's just really unfortunate how some of the information came together. And this is me trying to learn and become a better storyteller. And I recommend this kind of a thing to new storytellers out there. If you didn't make it to final day, what was the thing that happened? Was that a thing that was just really unlucky, or was it a player that didn't understand the game? What were the circumstances that came together for this to happen? Reflect on that. Could I have changed something? Is there something I can do to make these things better? Like if you're playing with a consistent group, is there a player that I need to give some suggestions to on how to play or how to deal with these things, so that maybe they're not slayed on the first day, or maybe they're not immediately executed for being the demon. But again, that's just a meditation from me. I do a lot of Clocktower content on this channel. I have a lot of commentary stuff. I have a couple of games up recently that is a full playthrough, and a bunch of other storyteller tips. So definitely go and check that out if you are new to storytelling, or you are looking for some ideas to help you get a bit more confident in it. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps me out a lot.